Hey Charlie, how are you doing today?
Hey Tara, I'm great. I'm excited to be here with you, and I've been looking forward to it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. I've been interested to talk to you since our first conversation, June. It
I
couldn't have
don't,
been
yeah,
June or July. It was something like that, right?
it was definitely not. The first one was not in August, so it's certainly June or July.
Yeah, I think
I don't
so.
remember anymore.
I
That's why.
know. Time goes by so fast. But you have such an incredible life journey that you've gone through and like this change because you were in real estate for a super long time, right? With your dad, didn't you guys own a company together?
Well, yes, it was a company that I'll try to be brief, but illustrate sort of part of that journey for you. And I don't think you know about this. I'm not even sure Stu knows about this. So in 1892, my great 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 something started was a riverboat, a barge captain on the Potomac River, and brought loads of brick back and forth from what is now Crystal City, Virginia, for the original Capitol buildings that have all, to quote Monty Python, have burned down, fallen over, and sank into the swamp. And John Miller had the great idea to, why would I carry these for people all day? Why don't I make them and carry them and make money on it? And that's the way our business started. But over the past, well, over 100 years, I can't do that math that quickly, Tara. The company evolved many, many times and then became what I used to call a commercial real estate development and holding company. So we occasionally did development. We did lots of partnerships with land that John Miller bought in 1892 in Crystal City, in what became Crystal City, and then and built some projects, built a golf course, a restaurant, several restaurants. Don't get in the restaurant business. Just kidding, everybody. It wasn't our forte, but we marinas, did many, many different things with the seeds that my grandfathers built. And at one point, when they didn't know what to do with this land where the brick factories were, my grandfather said, as Dad told me, I don't know what we're going to do with this land, but because it was basically nowhere back then in the after World War II. He said, but it's looking across the river at the Capitol, so I think it's going to be worth something someday. And that parlayed, it's a longer story, into the real estate company where I work with my father for over 25 years. But the interesting part for growth for you and hopefully for your audience, Tara, is that we did many different things in a sort of a holistic way, or Taoistic way, as I like to say, because we didn't just do real estate development. Very rarely did we develop until we built a couple of golf courses. We did real estate holding, property management. My first job at the company when I was 20 something was to be a real estate property manager. I managed an apartment building, managed an office building, and then we worked on other deals as we began to do new and different things. I call it falling forward. My father never Oscar, my partner's asked me many times, how did your dad, get into real estate? I mean, get into golf? How did he get into the marina business? He just saw the potential. It was nothing that he had a background for. And by working with him over the years, I was a property manager, I was a tourism coordinator. I started our corporate philanthropy in the last few years of my time at the brick companies. So I ended up doing a lot of different things, managed the restaurant, the motel, developed and then managed golf, which was a whole wild thing and we were horrible athletes. So we knew we had no business getting into golf. I think I've broken 100 one time. And
Better than me. So
well, golf is not a game to is a game to be enjoyed, in my opinion. So Dad and I loved golf because we got to tell jokes and stories and socialize. He had a tournament once many years ago where everybody had to switch partners at the after 9 holes, and everybody hated the idea until they switched partners at 9 holes and got somebody new to talk to for the next 2 hours, and it was pretty cool. And he had great instincts, and I learned from Dad just to follow your instincts, follow where you see a need, and try to grow into it with good old-fashioned instincts. Dad never went to business school, but he had great instincts. He never tried to teach me anything, but I was thinking about our talk this morning, I kind of learned by osmosis, by watching him and trying to think about how he fell into things, and how that developed. And the same thing happened with my career and podcasting, now what I call media production, because I knew from my experience, I guess I'm probably going too fast, but I knew from my experience at the end of my term at the brick companies, developing the corporate charities, that communication was so important. How can we say that we're doing good without spending any money? Because I wanted all the money we raised to go to the charities. And I developed a system where we could involve all of the
Wow.
employees in that effort. And I knew, so I used YouTube. My friend Garrett taught me what Twitter was, because I said, I don't understand this thing, and et cetera. So I knew that communications in a rapidly evolving world was the key. Whether you're doing marketing, I loved marketing, never studied anything about it. My friend
Yeah.
Jan Holt taught me so much about marketing when she worked for us for many years. So I knew that I had begun listening to podcasts, boy, maybe 18 years ago. The earliest one I listened to still exists, called For Immediate Release by Shel Holtz and Neville Hobson. And during the quarantine, I've become friends with them, just as you and I have become friends through the television, through the computer.
Yeah.
And I knew that I just had a gut instinct, perhaps the way my father had about the marina business, the way John Miller had about bricks, that this was an important way that everyone was going to be communicating. And they illustrate that when I started, which is just almost 10 years ago, actually creating and producing. And I did it all myself back then. You understand that, Tara. You don't have any other arms and legs than the ones you got. R2D2 here was my first intern, literally. And he was not very helpful, but he was a good communicator. I could turn him on, but I won't. I
Oh.
just saw the viability of that form of communication and how sincere it was. 10 years ago, I spent a great deal of my time, as you can imagine, explaining to people what is this thing they call a podcast. And in
Mm.
fact, Cliff Ravenscraft, who was one of the guys I looked to learn at that time, talked a lot about how he would walk up to people and say, hey, you see this app on your phone? That's what I do. Download that app and subscribe to my show. Today, 10 years later, I don't actually have to say that. Everybody knows what a podcast is. Look at the numbers from Edison Research. Great source, everyone, on that. What I say to most people, whether they're talking about broadcasting out as you are today or broadcasting, communicating inside a company, I say basically, why aren't you? Because while we may be a high-end way of doing it, there are ways to do it simply with your phone, as everyone probably already knows. And it's just a great way. I speak to CEOs whenever I can. Why aren't you creating media, not necessarily podcasting anymore, for your employees to connect with your staff? Because we're not really doing face-to-face other than digital face-to-face. Why aren't you giving your message? Because the CEOs don't think of that. They stay behind the door, at least 5 years ago they did mostly. And how can we communicate there? I know that that when Dad was in charge of the brick companies, everybody was drawn to him. He was a very charismatic. He was, someone that they loved working for. I think that using these tools is very important. So I talk about inner podcasting inside an organization quite often. Ray Ortega, who I learned a lot about podcasting from, used to do a podcast for the National Health Institute here in Bethesda, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you can find it. You have to deep dive in their website. And I found it a couple of times. It was really hard to find it, but it was only really for NIH employees. And I was fascinated by that. And I don't think there's enough. We hosted a recording session for Uber. Oh gosh, that must be 5 or 6 years ago. Now their whole thing is out in Seattle, right? But they were here doing something, and you will never hear about that podcast. It was made for the employees. I think that's an absolutely fascinating. So it's all about how we tell stories and how we communicate and how we can communicate sincerely, I guess.
I love that. No, and that's so right on, because and any like you said, human communication, human everything has changed a lot. And I feel the same thing with LinkedIn. Like if
Uh-huh.
you're an executive on LinkedIn and you're not on, or pardon me, if you're an
And you're not
executive
on
and you're
LinkedIn.
not on LinkedIn
Yeah,
leading your teams through social media, how else, if you're a huge executive from and you have 1,500 employees, can you possibly reach those folks? So things like podcasts
I
and
agree.
being on social, I mean,
Yeah.
it's life or death at this point because that's where your people are, and that's what people expect, right?
I agree. As a 60-year-old, I find it frustrating that some of my peers that I've worked with for many years still will not join
Yeah.
something like LinkedIn. And I think it's incredibly valuable, incredibly important. It's your shingle, in my opinion. And when I encounter people who send me an invitation who don't have a profile picture or don't have a background picture, I can tell you my decision is pretty quickly made. Because if they don't have enough time to post a photograph of themselves or a little bit of background, then I'm probably not really going to read the resume. Does that make sense?
A
Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's like you get 5 to 7 seconds for a first impression.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's everything.
Right.
You said something that I wanted to touch on because you said it so fast, but
Oh
we
dear.
actually talked about this yesterday, and I've been meaning to talk to you about it. So thanks for bringing it up.
Okay.
Your passion for Chinese Taoism. And then you also talked about money as, when you were talking about the real estate company, how are
Hmm.
we going to do good without spending money?
Right. How
So
can I?
how does that in Taoism, because it's very Taoistic, right? Because I think
Yes.
of money as an
Yes.
energy exchange, right? Is that
Right.
where you're going with that?
Well, to an extent, it is absolutely. I'm actually, stay tuned, folks, because there's a work I'm working on that will address that head on, hopefully in October. But I learned, my brother Rod went on a journey back when he was a teenager. He started meditating. Anybody remember transcendental meditation? Anyway,
I do.
he started on a journey which ended in going through many comparative religions and ended up with him becoming a Phi Beta Kappa from George Washington, a doctor of psychiatry, and a full-blown Sufi priest. I attended his ordination. A Catholic nun was ordained a Sufi priest at that same ordination. There's lots of stories I can tell about it. I basically got off at Taoism because it just made sense to me. As Alan Watts called it, it's the watercourse way. So I'm carving rock, but I'm doing it slowly and without friction, without hard uh, hard battles fought. I'm doing it,
Resistance, no resistance, right?
right. So when I was trying to promote, or to get back to your comment about promoting, and as I said, try to wear the white hat without spending any money, I used the employee's own words. I created what I call the V what was the volunteer grant VGP, the volunteer grant program, where I would give any employee who did any volunteer work for a real charity of their own time, their own discretionary time, I would give them $50 towards the charity of their choice.
That's
And
great.
then I would get, when they reached $1,000, or I forget the threshold, it's been a little while, Tara, I would make a video of them explaining why they did that work and why they gave it to them. I thought, as the employer, as the person in charge of giving, then I would acknowledge the employee. I would acknowledge the employee's interests. I would acknowledge the charity. I'd get a letter if he worked at one charity, he or she, sorry, worked at one charity and then donated to another charity. That was a twofer for me because I get to write a letter to the charity saying thank you so much for da, and then I would write a letter to the donated charity. So it was a way of sharing positive recognition. And I did have several opportunities, several times when I would be at one of our facilities, just kicking the tires, picking up trash in the parking lot, and people would come up to me and say, look, I don't know if you know this, but I have this really weird charity. It was training dogs for the blind. I think one of them was. He said, I don't have any money, and you allowed me through your program to give $600 to my charity, and I just want to say thank you. That gets my engine running.
Yeah.
Because it's acknowledging everybody in sight in a very healthy, non-negative way, if that makes sense. So I do try to follow a path of least resistance. I think Taoism for my purposes, has taught me that. I went on to major in religion and philosophy in college, Tara, and my final paper was on Taoism, and I'm afraid to read it now, though. That was a long time
Well, you've
ago.
learned a lot since then, Charles.
Perhaps the road has weathered my viewpoint, but I, that's how I try to look at it. One thing you didn't ask, I wanted to add real quickly, is that from the experience I had with my father doing so many different types of businesses without really a coordinated plan, I think we would, if you and I were to do this today, we would try to make something of a business plan for it.
Yeah.
But I learned how to try and apply lessons across the disciplines. So the easiest analogy is in a motel or a hotel, you and I talk about heads on beds, right? In a marina, we're talking about how to fill up all those slips. In a golf course, we're talking about how to fill the tee sheet. In a media studio, I want to see somebody in every studio every other hour, if it's possible. You can't do hour to hour because you got to clean it up. You wipe it down, change the microphone foam so that you can, have it clean for the next person. We boil them every night, things like that. So it's how can I apply a lesson that doesn't seem like I can apply to media from a marina or property management, and that just sort of happened naturally as well. And I think that's a really healthy way for us all to look at it. Home life, family life, professional life. I think there are lessons learned everywhere.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of the things, and I've preached this for such a long time. You said your dad, he saw potential. So, and he followed his instincts, and
Yes.
he was just good at just business. And you don't have to have an MBA. I have one, but you don't have to have.
No, that's true.
You have to have instincts, and you have to act. That's so important. Like, it's not enough to think and visualize. Those are great.
Yeah.
Those are a bridge, but you absolutely have to act. And when you feel something,
Right.
it's a calling, do it,
Right.
It's a passion. You've got to go for it and don't resist it, right?
And that's truly how I felt about podcasting. I had tried after I left commercial real estate. It was easy enough to say, what am I going to do now? I'll try residential real estate. Sorry for all you residential folks out there. It was not for me. I was not happy. And it was a different type than had been 30 years ago. Nobody was really helping the new guy, the new person. It really wasn't a culture that I enjoyed. Everybody was trying to cheat everybody else out of commission, at least at the shop that I spent about a year at. And then I was offered a free office space in a co-working environment. And I said, hey, look, for rent, I'm going to interview. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I thought I had the equipment. I did not. And I just said, look, I'll interview each one of these coworkers because every one of their stories is completely different. There was a talent agency, digital catalog. Who knew what a digital catalog was, right? And so many other businesses, a film school. And I just interviewed one every week. And that's how I cut my teeth. They're all on SoundCloud. I won't tell you where, but they're on SoundCloud still. And that was my first show out of about 20 or 30 I did before I partnered with my Oscar Zabayos, my business partner, and learned how to post, learned how to edit, learned how to. It was when I hit video that I realized I was not going to learn that. And so I'll lay on you what Dad said to me. He said, Chaz, I don't have to be an MBA. I don't have to be smart. I just have to know who I can call to help me fix this problem. It could be a lawyer. We brought in hotel consultants. We brought in golf consultants when we had no idea what we were doing. To build a 36-hole golf course without ever having managed golf for one day was a pretty crazy thing to do. He and I, but really him, just had a honest conviction and a couple of very simple statistics that we felt this would win. And that's how I felt about Podcast Village, which has become Podville Media, is that this is something, and if you look at the statistics, it's still in, believe it or not, it's infancy. The shows that last, the shows that don't last, we call it pod fading, is extraordinary. There's still an enormous amount of growth for the homemade ones and the professional ones to grow into this space. Because we all, let's face it, you and I, we all have stories. We all have stories that we'd like to tell, stories we'd like to hear. It goes back to the earliest, communications we had as humankind, uh, cave paintings, frankly. It's
Yeah.
all telling a story, communicating, trying to learn something. I listen to the Daily every morning. I listen to a whole bunch of shows. I listen to everything we produce. It's exciting to still be learning and
Yeah.
sharing.
Absolutely. And you hit it right on the head. Evolutionarily, we are designed to, well, you said a couple things that struck me. We're designed to learn. We're designed to love storytelling. Like
100%.
that's, oh my
Yep.
God, like our brains just absorb it. We love it so much. So when you open up and when you share your story, it's actually a really powerful thing because, well,
Right.
for a lot of reasons, it can connect you with somebody you had no idea
Right.
with. Previously, you're all of a sudden they feel like they know you. So if
Right.
if you're in a business, sharing your story can't be any more powerful because, well, prospective clients are watching or prospective employees or business partners, investors, whatever. And
Yep.
it's about sharing that human story that's relatable, and people love it because it's a genuine thing. And only
100%.
you have
Yep.
had your story, right, Charlie? I mean, nobody else has had your
Nope.
same story.
No. Thank goodness. No, and I've subjected my stories on very many people, and I love to tell stories. Dad was wrote folk songs and sang and was a wonderful public speaker, and I was grateful to learn so many lessons from him. But he always said, "Look, Jazz, I don't know what to teach you. I'm not a teacher, but I learned, as I said, I think earlier by osmosis, and I'm very grateful for those lessons. I still tell a lot of his jokes and a lot of his stories, and try to pay homage to that. And one time, Tara, when I was in college, I had the opportunity to go to a little island off the coast of Georgia, and they brought in an actual storyteller. He looked like Burl Ives. He had a big long walking stick. We were sitting around a campfire, and he just told stories. That was his profession. He was a storyteller. That was really significant. I mean, that was
Wow.
beautiful, right? And I'd
Yeah.
seen Hal Holbrook do a Mark Twain or Will Rogers one man show. And then I saw this gentleman do that. And I thought, there's something really, and it's always stayed with me. A professional storyteller. He looked like a hobo, but he wasn't. He was dressed for work, and he spun tales for an hour and a half, and we were mesmerized. So that
That's,
resonates with me a great deal as well.
yeah, that's interesting. And it's such a powerful statement too. Like, so we've covered you don't necessarily have to have an education to get into the career you want,
I don't
but
think so.
also you have to follow your calling, follow your purpose. I talk about that a lot on
I
this
agree.
newsletter because I think so many people are in the mindset, Charlie, of, I've got to spend a bunch of money and get a college degree, and I need to work in corporate, or I need to do this, Y, and the other. But you don't even listen to what your true purpose is, what your calling is,
Right.
what you're passionate about.
Right.
And then, all of a sudden you get into your midlife crisis and then you say, what happened to me? Where has the time gone? Right.
I do say that. Yes.
Well, it's not going to stop us all from saying it for sure. But,
No.
catch it early. And, these
Right.
kids that are going into college and thinking that maybe
Absolutely.
that's the only avenue for them when they don't even know that there's a potential to be a storyteller one day, or a musician or a podcaster
Right.
or whatever.
Or something different. My daughter is college graduate, University of Vermont, is in her first taking accelerated master's in history. She's going to be a music teacher. She's got a degree in music education and history, but she's following her path that she feels extraordinarily passionate about. And as a parent, I think being a teacher is great because boy, do we need some teachers.
Yeah.
And my son was not particularly enraptured with college, and it was also the very beginning of COVID and quarantine. It was a mess. But he found what he wanted. He is now finishing his first degree in massage therapy. He's going on to a second degree, and he is completely fulfilled. He has followed his passion,
Wow.
and he's already working. He's incredibly popular. He looks like a Greek god because all he does is eat healthy and work out. I wish I'd
Does he
done
have
that
the
when I
long
was.
hair too?
He does. He looks
Oh,
like
nice.
he
He's
looks
like
like my
Thor.
middle brother, with a scruffle and long hair. But He has that personal magnetism, and I'm so happy as a father for him following his instincts. I can't tell you how that makes both Alice and I happy when we look at how our children have followed their instincts, and I hope we've influenced them to some extent. But we never said, you know what, you got to go to college. The hell with that. I don't really believe in that.
Yeah.
For Isabel, my daughter, she really wanted to go. She loves learning. Great. I'm going to support that as long as she wants. Now she would like to travel and teach and these are things that she should do. But it's about following, as you said, following your passion, following your creativity. When I started podcasting, when I was not interviewing, but having two people, in the early days, it was a Formica table with two microphones, as I like to say. And I would be running the board and I'd be sitting in the same room. That's early days. And so what am I going to do while I'm there? I learned early on to take photographs of my guests because that's a way to promote, tell the story, viral marketing or whatever we want to call it. And then I'd sit there with my iPad 1 and I'd turn those photographs into drawings. I've been drawing podcasts, which sounds absolutely bizarre, for 10 years. It's become
Wow.
part of the little weirdness that we all are. And I bring that to the company. Many of our clients love these. They use them. They like them. Even one of our ESPN hosts, I was afraid to show it to her. And she said, I love that. So it's following your creative passion. I did a Covey exercise, Tara, many, many years ago, and found that my favorite word was creativity. And I followed that ever since, to follow my creative nose as much as I possibly can. And also, very proud of being an entrepreneur and paying people's salaries. We have about 10, 12 people here, given on how many jobs we have at the given time. And when I think about Dad and paying honor and tribute to him and all my experiences, I think that I'm very proud that we've been able to turn this into a profitable business, that we actually, make a difference and employ other people.
That's what it's all about. It's not,
I hope so.
I've talked about that, and it's not enough to be a self-serving business and just make a bunch of money. You have to give back
I
to your
don't,
community.
yeah,
And it's a good thing to make money so that you can, give back and help others and create jobs. It's very important. It's what
yeah.
makes the world go round.
Well, the next level for me, I hope, as I get a little older, is to create a charitable arm for the media business and try to support podcasts and media production for those who need it, want it, but can't afford it, or only have the story, but not the skills to do it perhaps on their own. And Oscar and I talk about this all the time. I hope in the next few years I can create just sort of a pro bono aspect of the company. We would have a small group that would approve projects probably and work on creative initiatives specifically. That's where I hope to be in a short time. So
That's amazing. See, look at that. So I have a lot of lessons from today, but number one is following your instincts, but also, be creative. And I think so many people that are creative minded, they're afraid to ask for money too, or don't know how to ask for money.
it's a good point. Very good point.
So, the important thing is that any skill set, and any person has this ability, any person has some ability, some skill set, some talent that somebody else wants, needs, and desires, and will pay
Absolutely.
money for it.
Yep.
So I think it's a good thing. Follow those instincts. That's because that's your passion. That's your purpose calling you to do something.
Yeah.
Follow it, and then the money will come if you have like enough action and a game plan. And even if you don't know how to do something, like your father, he utilized his resources. He
100%.
found people
Yeah.
to help, right?
He did. He did. That was his secret. He was like, I don't have to know everything, Charlie, but I do need to know how to figure out who to call
Yeah.
to help me, whether it was a lawyer or an architect. We worked with architects. We didn't know a thing about architecture, Tara, but we were sleeves rolled up with if you know what I'm talking about, a wad of bum wad rolled out over the table, and we would all work on that with Chuck and the other architects that we work with for Queenstown and other projects. We would get involved and talk about it. I remember once years ago, my wife and I were on a trip and we were having a drink, and we said, so this is fascinating. I love the design of this room. And he said, oh my God, it's the worst. And I said, really? Why? He's like, no one who ever designed a bar, or worked in a bar, excuse me, designed this, because the short version, every night we have to tear the whole thing down and lock it up and move it out. And I'm like, wait, and I've seen this in other establishments
Yeah.
where the guy behind the counter said, yeah, they didn't build any trash cans. We have no way to throw things out. That's why I'm leaving the room every 5 minutes. And I thought, why aren't we using, a la my father, why aren't we using the right people in the room to help you figure out what the right facilitation? That's Taoistic. If you want to go back to that, it's using the right tools for the right job. Period.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah. And it's okay not to know everything, and like
I
leave
don't
your
know
ego at
everything.
the door. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think any entrepreneur has gone through that lesson. Actually, it is a must required lesson. I feel like to be
Yes.
successful is you have to have an ego and then kick it away, because we have to get out of our own heads. You
That's a
can't
great point.
physically do everything. You cannot. And even if you could, why? You need to free up your time to do your actual work, not learn, like you said, video editing. I don't know how to do that, right? So
It's
hire
brutal.
somebody else,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know?
That was how one aspect of learning that lesson was when my clients, my initial intent with Podcast Village was audio only, periods, full stop, because I understood audio. I could do it pretty well. Other podcasters would call me up and say, hey, you're not compressing that sound right. And it was a very giving community 10 years ago. Very, very giving. I'm not a startup anymore, so I don't know. I actually don't edit any audio anymore. I don't do any video anymore. It's I kind of miss it. I don't run the board for any of the shows anymore. But to be honest, the technology has changed and progressed. The tools are much more sophisticated that we use than I used 10 years ago. I used a 4-track and a 2-track recorder. I did it all myself. I had everything in one of my kids' backpacks when I had to do remotes,
Wow.
literally. But today, it's a completely different thing. If we have a remote, we send what I call the Podville Express out, and has a Comrex in it, and we get the highest quality audio, and we run that end from here. And we try to do, I've always said it's a cocktail for the ear, and we want to make, a really good experience that you wouldn't worry about echo. Because there's so many early podcasts that sounded, maybe they were, like they were doing it from a bathroom, because you get
Right.
that
They
bounce.
may have been. You never know.
They may have been. Debbie DeChambeau, who started podcasting with me. She did what I wrote about in a little book I wrote on podcasting. She would pull a card table into her closet where all of her clothes were, which is a great way to do it when you're a startup, and do her one-person podcast from the closet. Why? Because it was just as good as, you can see the triangles on my wall behind me.
Yep.
This is made out as a podcast studio, so I can talk to you without worrying about going into a studio. I know that the sound's going to be good. That's why I have this rig at my desk. So Debbie would back up her rig into the closet and get that wonderful, quiet, enveloping wraparound zero sound, and that which was so important. So respect for the ear, respect for your audience, respect for your craft.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're inspiring me to start my own podcast. I've thought about it, and I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but you're inspiring me. I think it's important, again, get those stories out there, and then let people know you exist. People don't know you exist unless you tell them, and
True.
nobody's going to market yourself except for yourself, right?
True.
Generally.
There,
So it's
don't forget,
important.
there's also OPP, and I think Stu Heineck is a great example of this. That's called Other People's Podcasts. And I know you've been
Yeah.
on others, and you've
Oh,
hosted
yeah.
others, and it's a wonderful way. And I'm doing that right now. It's not a podcast, but you're interviewing me. I think it's a wonderful way to share, to get to know people. You and I have got to know each other this summer,
Yeah.
and exchange of ideas. What we want in social media, which I sort of call media now, is engagement. It's not just the clicks. As I am monitoring our clients' works and the works that I follow personally, I try to make the extra effort to create, even if it's only a phrase or a word, not just a click, but a comment, an actual engagement, that says, yeah, I listened to this.
Yep.
It was inspiring. That's all you have to say.
Yep.
The person who's created that, whether it's you, Tara, or myself, that's manna, that's energy. When you actually
Yeah,
get honest to gosh engagement, that's pretty thrilling.
it is.
Hearts are great, like or likes or whatever we're calling them, are wonderful, and that is energy as well. Um, but the engagement when people are listening to you, that's a treasure, you know.
It is. Absolutely. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. You're one comment, one connection
Hmm.
away from a totally different life.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
You wouldn't believe the responses I've gotten because of a comment. Because it's thoughtful, right? And
yeah,
you want to make sure that you pay attention to people, and people can feel that energy. They can feel that reciprocity, and they can feel the
I agree.
genuineness as well.
Yeah,
And when,
that's
you know,
100% true. Yeah,
yeah. And when you have that genuine energy and engage with your audience like that, people know. And they engage right back with you. And that's how you build a community of supporters and a network that
yeah.
genuinely, you know, support you.
Yep. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I stay connected. I use LinkedIn, as I'm sure you do, also the mobile version. And I like to see what thought leaders, and we're all thought leaders, are saying about their experiences, whether they're in the media industry or insurance. Mark Halpert, who's another LinkedIn specialist, he focuses on LinkedIn for lawyers, but it's really not for lawyers. I've read his book several times. You can read it as a lawyer. You can also read it as me or you or a restaurateur. It's lessons learned and how we choose to hear that. And I think that's important to keep in mind, how we can cross. I think about my summer camp counselor experience all the time, and the exchanges and the lessons I learned running the sailing program and what that meant to me. And I apply that all the time, or I try to. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I love it, Charlie. You have such fun energy. Um, and for anybody, one piece of advice real quick before our time runs out, for anybody wanting to start a podcast or maybe they don't think they have the confidence to do it or the skill
Oh,
set.
sure.
What do you think? Do you have one piece of advice for people?
Well, I'll tell you what I did when I started, because I did not know what I was doing. I just saw the potential. I absolutely felt it, but I started recording myself in the car and in my closet, as Debbie did, to listen to it, to sample it. My harshest critic, my closest friend, he's, "What are you doing with your life?" Then I got him into the office. He saw the rig. He's like, "Okay, I think I understand it." I put the headphones on him. We did a mock interview. He said, "I get it." I played it back from him from a computer. 5 minutes later, he said, "I want 6." We did 6. He still has them on his website to this day. They are evergreen. So there are a lot of ways to cut this. Practicing just as as if you and I were musicians. It takes practice, experience, what we used to call stick time. And once you get used to your own voice and used to how you speak and exchange, that's the first part. Just get started.
Yep.
Don't stay in place. Go ahead and move forward. You'll make mistakes.
Yep.
That's okay.
Just get started.